Hello, everyone. We're really happy to be here this evening. Welcome to Just Talk Live. Hello, Destiny.
What's up, Lee? So y'all, if y'all see me kind of lift my head up periodically, I got new glasses and they kind of giving us weird glare and blare. So I'm just gonna periodically lift my head up for better visuals. So don't think I'm going crazy or anything.
Get that screen off the glasses. That is one
Yes.
of the things that is really hard during this like virtual thing. If you want your glasses not to glare, you have to have like a spotlight on your face, which I do. If I were to do this, y'all see my ring light on my glasses. That is the only reason why I don't have a glare, because I have a light shining in my face.
Need a light.
Yeah, but we're gonna get Destiny a ring light for productions. So don't y'all worry about the glare. But we kind of match. Look at our clear frame glasses.
Yes. Yes.
We did not plan that, but
We did not.
but yeah, welcome everyone to Just Talk Live. And tonight we're going to be talking about lament and protest, which is kind of why we started off in a funny. We're trying to make it a little light because we're going to get a little heavy this evening.
Mhm.
Um, but I think Destiny is going to introduce our person.
Yes, I am very excited to bring on Rebecca Leister on tonight. She is from my hometown presbytery, Carlisle Presbyterian, Pennsylvania. Woo woo. And I met her actually through a Presbyterian woman gathering. Oh, I'm lagging. Okay, but I'm gonna press through it. I met her at a Presbyterian woman gathering for Carlisle, and she highlighted the Horizons Bible study for last year. And if you haven't seen that, oh, Rebecca comes prepared. Look at that. Um, and it was about a piece of it was about lament, and she just talked so beautifully about that series. So she has done some work with us on the in World Mission with the YAB program about lament and protest, and Lee and I thought it was important to bring this conversation to a broader audience. So without further ado, I welcome Rebecca. Can you just introduce yourself before we dive in? Let the audience know a little bit about you, your background, and anything else that you think might be helpful to share.
Sounds great. I'm Rebecca Lister. Nice to meet you all. Good to see you all. I am a musician, actually. I teach at Lebanon Valley College in Annville, Pennsylvania. I'm a voice teacher, so I'm a singer, and teach some other academic classes along to go with that. But I'm also currently working on my Master's of Divinity from University of Dubuque Theological Seminary. It's actually an online degree. I hope to graduate before Jesus comes back. That's the goal. Don't know that it will happen, but hey, we can hope. So I am taking courses right now as I'm teaching, and it's a wonderful program. I have to say, I can't say enough really great things about it. It has allowed me to, stay here in my job and, not uproot my life and my family. And it's allowed me to pursue a call, which is a really beautiful thing. And a few years ago, you wouldn't be able to do that, but now we can. So I'm really loving that. And again, I was invited to do this presentation, the Lament presentation. They ask a seminary student to do it every summer. And so when I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, what an incredibly apt subject to be looking at. And here's what's really interesting. I went to a webinar that the lady, Lynn Miller, who did this, wrote this study, originated this study. She was saying she actually wrote it and put it by for approval in 2017. So it was just approved this year. They had no idea that this was the year that this was going to come out. But we all know that God knew that this was the year that this was supposed to come out. Because again, we have a lot to lament. And kind of, again, at the outset, I was telling Lee and Destiny that I didn't want this to be a downer. I don't want people to think, oh, yay, let's talk about lament. But I do feel like it's important, especially right now in our country. There's certainly many causes for hope, right? And yet I also think that there's still a lot of stuff going on that is very unresolved and that we still really need to look at. And lament is a way of doing that. It's a way of stopping and looking at something that is wrong and not just griping about it and whining about it, but calling attention to it and making people see it. That's the other thing I think it's really important, is to not think of lament as whining or, griping or complaining. It is, but it is a form of complaint that has a form to it, that has steps to it. And that in the end, actually what's so wonderful about laments is that there is always hope at the end, because you are always thinking about God's promises within that suffering that we're looking at, that injustice we're looking at, that oppression we're looking at, yet we're looking at it with the hope that God sees it too, and that God is going to fix it. And that's the other thing we are saying, you know what, we can't do this. We need your help. We can't do this by ourselves. We need God to step in and help us fix this, because, some of these problems are bigger than any of us can ever do by ourselves. So that's what I think lament is for. It's a wonderful container. It's a wonderful form that allows us to communicate openly with our God who wants to talk to us. How cool is that? That's the kind of God we have, a God that wants to hear from us and wants to talk to us, even when it's bad. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we were talking before this, and like, well, we are the show that kind of brings it down a little bit, but we do that for a reason, to have these kinds of conversations. But I always wonder why we don't often put an emphasis on lament, why we don't want to go there. And if we do go there, I've heard in the past that, why would you say that to God, or why would you be this way to God? And so I wonder if you can talk about that too, like why is it so hard for people of faith to just to let it out to God?
That's a great question. And here's the thing though. Lament is scriptural, right? So this isn't something we're just making up. It's in the Bible. And if it's in the Bible, then that says to me, then it's a cause that we should be taking up, right? It's a form we should be exploring and taking up. I think, if I'm thinking of it from a personal point of view, I guess it's this idea of respect, right? We want to respect God. We think of God as our heavenly Father, and most of us wouldn't want to talk to our Father in a disrespectful way, or a relative, say, in a disrespectful way. And yet, again, because it's in the Bible, when you look at laments, there is a lot of, how long, Lord? What's up, God? Don't you see that? Hello. It is there. And so, again, maybe it's because we don't want to be disrespectful. Maybe it's because we want to talk nicely. We don't want to be rude. We don't want to complain. But again, there are all kinds of examples in the Bible of people doing that very thing. People in the Psalms, Habakkuk, Lamentations, Jeremiah, it's all through it. And that to me says, if it's there, then we should feel like we can do it. We should feel like we have the freedom to do that. And not only that, but I think it's more even than freedom, and even more than invitation. I think we're required to do it. I really do.
You kind of hit on my question, so I'll ask it, but then I'll broaden it to add some modern day context. I was going to ask, but you kind of, like I said, hit on it. What is our duty as people of faith around lamenting? And why do you think the church has moved away from kind of not normalizing lament as a way, as a, I guess, sacred or godly act.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first little nugget question.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can throw in there some modern day, I guess, examples of lament,
Mm-hmm.
particularly around protesting and why that is important as people of faith, to lift those different expressions of lament up as well.
Mm-hmm. So the first question I would say, I mean, I hate to use this cliche because, you know, it's been used for years and everybody's like, yeah, whatever. You know, I'm a Presbyterian, so I'm one of God's frozen people, right? The chosen frozen. And Presbyterians, again, I hate to use a blanket statement because that's, you know, that's not fair. But in general, and again, if I were to be very honest, my own church, sometimes we struggle to show affection to one another or to show feelings, emotion. And in fact, even, you know, when you think of people like Calvin, they were very much against any type of emotional thing because human emotion isn't necessarily something you can trust, right? Intellect, you should be trusting reason, and God, more than anything, you should be trusting God rather than your own personal feelings. So I think that that's what's brought some of it, this idea that that church is about hearing the word and understanding, and it's a brain thing. I don't always think that it becomes a heart thing as well as it could. And yes, I think that there quite often, when you think about preaching nowadays, okay, it's very seldom that you hear people preach Lamentations or preach from even the Old Testament. I remember when I took my Old Testament class, my Old Testament professor was saying, you know, people really want to preach the Gospels. They want to preach the epistles, and the Old Testament's kind of like, yeah, that's the old stuff that we don't, you know, those old laws we don't have to worry about anymore. So I think it's kind of a couple of things, this idea of not wanting to, just kind of feeling uncomfortable expressing emotion, and then really wanting to focus on good news, right? We want to focus on the gospel. And of course we do. But I also think that we can't just focus on that and then not look at these other things that Jesus talked about that are very real. So that's the answer to your first question. As far as modern ways of lamenting, one way besides protesting, and I'll talk about that in a moment too, is even just poetry. You know, people, I think, sometimes don't feel like they're capable of writing poetry and they're uncomfortable to pray. And I think it's something that, again, a practice we need to take back again, and to believe that anybody, whether you're a pastor or not, or whether you're a church leader or not, you can pray. You know, we pray in the name of Jesus because thank goodness Jesus is going to take it and intercede for us and make that prayer way better than anything we could ever say, right? So yeah, I mean, I think even poetry, I mean, even think of that beautiful poem that was read at the inauguration. Oh my gosh, you know, just made me cry. With joy though, not just, but again, she was talking about really real stuff, right? She wasn't shying away, which was why it was so beautiful, I think. As far as lamenting and protest marches, again, this was not my idea. This was Lynn Miller's idea. I had never thought of this. I had never thought of a protest march as being a form of lament. And then as soon as I read that, it resonated so deeply within me. I thought, yes, it is, you know, protest marches, when they're done correctly, right? When they're done correctly, are an embodiment. They're a physical embodiment of a lament. There is a subject that we are pointing at that has caused suffering. We're therefore lamenting about it. We are talking honestly about it with each other, but also with God. We have the faith that God is there with us in that protest march, that God sees what it is that we are up against and fighting against and wants to help us. And then that's what's hopefully going to be leading to healing and hope down the road. That's the other thing that I think is different with lament as opposed to just straight up complaining, that there is hope number one, that God's going to step in there, and number two, that something's going to be done. Because that is part of the lament form, is saying, this is what I would love to see happen, God, right? And then trusting that it will happen, that justice will win, that equality will win. So that's why I think that lament really can be a physical form, or protest marching can be a physical form of lament.
And I'm so glad that we are having a discussion about protests and framing that within our not just our tradition, but in our in our faith. But we've received, and Destiny and I were a part of the Presbyterian Church Week of Action, in which there was a march to really support and affirm that Black Lives Matters, specifically after a lot of the killings by police brutality.
So many.
And being in Louisville with Breonna Taylor, the church received so much negativity towards that march. And the way in which you describe protest as a form of lament, we often get pushback because protests are seen as, quote, political.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you can speak towards that a little bit, because we're seeing it right now in the aftermath of the election, the aftermath of the insurrection. Mm-hmm. But speaking to that kind of disconnect mm-hmm. of protest and brushing it off as the church doesn't need to be political.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you see, what is politics, right? And what is really at the heart of the matter, and what is really at the heart of this particular matter? And it is justice. That is what that particular protest march is about. It is injustice, plain and simple. And let me tell you, last time I read my Bible, there's a lot about injustice in the Bible. And let me just tell you too, that God tends to side with those who are being oppressed. It's a thing. And so I think that whereas I understand why some people might feel, okay, well, we don't want to be breaking windows and things like that. Okay. That I understand. And it doesn't have to be that way. But I think people focus on those things to take attention away from the real heart of the matter, right? People would rather focus on windows being broken and on looting, however, instead of, but wait, you're not looking at this, right? And this is worse than any of those windows that have been broken, right? I think that we are uncomfortable facing, again, that particular topic because we don't want to. I think a lot of people do not want to. And it's easier to just complain about it and not get our hands dirty, right? But it is about justice. And again, it is in the Bible. This is not something we are making up.
Yeah, Rebecca, previously, well, one, your comment here just hit on so many, I think, issues even that we struggle with as Christians, and particularly with this denomination, as Lee has lifted up, of being divided around proper forms, the ways of lament. But I kind of wanted to go back to a comment that you made earlier, just to clear it up for any viewers. I know, like, we discussed it as an inside joke, but you are not condoning protesting or people in that matter who not saying that it's right. However, you don't not condoning, you don't condemn. Bam. That's the word, condemn those methods of protesting. But the reason why you said if it was done right was actually in reference to what happened on January 6th. And I loved how, and I thought Lee was going to ask this question because he's been, usually on it when it comes to that, but I get to ask it today. Can you just describe or share to us your feelings about how what we saw on January 6th is maybe not a proper way of lament? I know you made that explicit with the Yavs when you came to talk to them about proper ways of lament. And, before you get to the part about, the different sections of lament, some might be thinking, just based off the conversation that we're having, well, those people were in that mind frame that they were standing up, they were oppressed and doing something correct, and that was their way of lament. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thank you, Destiny. What a great question. What a tough question, because you're exactly right. I can certainly see how people would see that point of view and have this idea of, but that was a protest and that was a lament too. And yet, again, I think that it goes back to power and who has the power and who does not have the power. And I also think that it has to do with posture. I talked about this in my YAV presentation, that a protest, to me, in my feeling, one that is a healthy protest has a certain posture and has certain elements present. And that posture is a posture of strength, but not a posture of overpowering. It is a posture of standing firm, but it is not a posture of hurting or beating or any of those types of things. I also think that there were some symbols present at that particular protest that were despicable. I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it, all right? If you think that having a noose in view on our mall, on our Capitol Mall, that is an okay thing for you, I'm sorry, I can't think of any nice way to paint it, or frankly, any nice way to put it. So, like I said, in my feeling, protests can involve singing, talking, shouting, chanting, all of those things, getting emotions out. But again, it's also so important to think about what it is that you are singing and chanting and what it is that you are saying. And when you are building others up, and when you're building up the body of Christ, that's totally different from the ugly things that I was hearing people saying at those particular protests. They are not the same. They are not to build up. That particular protest was not about building other people up, making things better for other people. It was anger and it was hatred. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I've kind of heard this, that to make the comparison, we've heard it in the political rhetoric,
Absolutely.
And from one of my home senators in South Carolina, I won't say his name, but making a comparison to Black Lives Matter protests alongside the protest I don't call that a protest. It's more of it's an insurrection. It was a mob. It was a riot. And just the posture of what you are undergirding, you're protesting or lamenting is a message of inclusion, is a message of, like you said, building up. And I wonder about, and this is going back to something that you said, it has to do with the Presbyterian Church, but also has to do with a lot of white denominations that are predominantly white. This idea of that we can't express, that we shouldn't be expressing emotion, or we should, like you were saying, rely on our intellect, and how that is a part of like white supremacy culture in general. And I wonder how we break that, because there's just so much emotion that is being built up, and there's and how do we provide spaces for that to really to just let it out. And so I wonder, how does the church really begin to provide spaces of lament for people? And how do we break this like terrible like white supremacist culture that you can't be emotional and you can't experience the spirit in the church? That to me has always been interesting. I was raised Presbyterian, but I got a little Baptist in my upbringing, and it's been really interesting to see the, like the oppression of the spirit in some ways. And I always say, like, the work that we're doing is like soul work. We can't think out of it. So I think this is a big part of that. So I wonder how we can begin to build those things in our church.
Again, it is such a great question. I think that that's what, again, after having done this study, what kind of the next step needs to be, right? Okay, so now we know that this is true, all right? We know that this is not present in many of our churches. Why is that? Okay, but I also think then we need to say, okay, well then what can we do? And you know what, guys, the only thing we can do is talk and have conversation. Like, I really wish there were another way. There isn't. The only way that you can understand somebody else's way of thinking is to talk to them. And we have to be able to try to start providing ways of doing that. And talking like we are, or even just what's even better is literally if you're in a room with someone or having a meal with someone, breaking bread with someone is really how you have these conversations. There's no other way. Social media can do some of it, but I don't know about you guys, but I just always feel like it's, social media is such a monologue. It's not a dialogue, it's a monologue. It's how I feel right now, and I'm not really listening to you. I'm just telling you what I think, and I think it should be much more of a dialogue. Going back to what you were saying, you just said something a second ago. You were talking about your senator. Again, this whole idea of deflecting to the Black Lives Matter protests. Again, to me, that's a deflection, and it's a way of. It's actually happening a lot right now in conversation, and it really drives me crazy. When you express a feeling or a pain or suffering or something to someone, and then they say, but this was so much worse, right? So not affirming what it is that you're feeling, but deflecting. And that's what all of that is about. When people deflect and say, well, that insurrection wasn't as bad as what happened with Black Lives Matter. And I say, no. That's not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is this right now, right? I need you to affirm that you heard what it is that I'm talking about, right? So don't try to change the conversation. Don't try and change the subject here. This is what we're focusing on right now. And I think that's why they use that particular tactic, because they want to kind of take your attention and focus back on that hot button issue. One final thing. I think one of the greatest, easiest, if I were to say it, places of talking about and having lament is Lent. I have to tell you, I grew up in the Baptist church, and I was talking about this in the YAB discussion. In the Baptist church, we don't have Maundy Thursday. I had never been to a Tenebrae service. I didn't even know what that was. Not until I became a Lutheran. I was a Lutheran for a while because that was the only flavor of religion they had out in the Midwest. So I was doing that for a while. But I went to that first Tenebrae service and I thought, what is this? And they snuffed out that last candle, and I was sitting in that church in the dark, and Christ was dead. Oh my gosh. That was so powerful to me. I will never forget it. I mean, I really won't. And so I think Lent offers us a great opportunity to do this very thing. Unfortunately, I don't always think that we take advantage of lament. Again, that sounds really weird, doesn't it? Let's take advantage of Lent, shall we, so that we can lament. But I mean, again, Lent offers us a great opportunity. It's what we're supposed to be doing anyway, right? Reflection. And lament is a great, again, conduit for that, a great form, a great vessel or holder for that very thing. So maybe Lent is the time to do that type of thing and have these hard conversations. So I don't know if y'all felt that way, if you feel that way about, Good Friday services and Tenebrae services, but I think they are critical. You cannot appreciate Christ is risen indeed, right? You cannot say that with the same feeling as whenever you were at that Tenebrae service on Friday and sat in that church in the silence and the dark. But then, again, what happens then? Great hope, yes. But before that hope comes, there's a lot of dark. And that's where we are right now, I think. Because again, I think people think, okay, yay, everything's so much better now, and there's hope, and we've got vaccinations and everything. I'm like, but wait, no. We're not done. We're not done. We have so much more to do, you guys. We have so much more.
And there's so much more to come too, and especially in this, like the past year, like going on like a year, like almost a year of being in the pandemic.
It's hard to believe. It
really is just a time of that. It's almost been like an extended Lent. Like it's been like, I mean, just like a season of just so much death and so much injustice and so much all of it together, and like political upheaval. And it's such such an old story too. Our scriptures are full of this, and in the midst of all of this, that's where the Psalms were. That's where all of this unrest and civil unrest and war and disease, that's where it all comes in. And to hear people want to skip over, you talk about, it's a new administration and we need to be unified and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, where are, that's not possible. If you are not going to be able to, for one, just digest what's happening emotionally, spiritually, but also Lent is like a time of turning and looking inward and repenting and confession. And I think all of that could be wrapped into one. And if any year to do it, take advantage of it. If you need to scream, I just wonder about how do we just provide spaces for people to just let things out and let it, and just let it flow. And we're not, as Reformed Christians, and a lot of time we're just not good at that, or we've had it trained out of us. And I wonder about that too. How do you get that back into, the church in many ways? I just wonder that all the time. I wonder it all the time.
It's interesting. It's a friend of mine and I were just talking the other day. I really don't feel like we've left Lent from last year. I really don't. It's such a wilderness. We really are in a wilderness. And it's taken the things that were already kind of problematic and edgy, and even things in the church that are problematic. And it's really exponentially magnified those things. So again, you have those churches who are really struggling right now because people aren't there and aren't coming. And there is that great fear. Well, will they come back? When we are in person, will they come back? So many, like you were saying, so many things to fear, so many things that are just eating on us, that we haven't gotten through yet. And again, I know not everybody processes the same way. Like some people really need to talk about things and really get them out there and really talk. And other people process them more quietly in different ways. And I think we need to respect that. I think that we shouldn't be forcing people who don't process that way to do so. But I also think that we need to be talking. We need to be talking. There is no other way. And I don't know about you guys, but I have some friends on Facebook who've recently said, well, I'm going to go off Facebook now because they are censoring. And so therefore that is my way of protesting, and I'm going, if you do that and then go on Parler, then all you're going to do is talk to the people in your own little world and echo chamber who agree with you. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook. I understand that. But, at least it's there. If I don't want to look at it, I'll page through it. Okay. But if you go and off to your people and then we're still over here and then we're not talking and communicating at all, you're not seeing anything that makes you uncomfortable or that makes you question something that you believe in. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but I've had more than 3 of my friends recently who've gone off Facebook because they're protesting that it's censorship.
That's interesting. I'll let Lee. I was going to go back to a previous comment that you all made, but Lee, if you had any input about this, yeah, I'm like you, Rebecca. If you don't like it, keep scrolling. But I will say, like you mentioned, the only way that we can move forward as not only a denomination or people of Christ, but as a society, is to have sustainable dialogue with people who look different than us, who think different than us, and to really be open to embracing those different opinions. But before we can even start talking, we need to just sit and be silent and let the Spirit move us. I think you and Lee both touched on some interesting points about how we are so in our head and everything has to be prescribed to the T. Our words need to be pretty. They need to be so poetic and have the references to, doctrines and theories and ditto prophets. But sometimes you just need to sit and let the Spirit move you. And in doing that, I was wondering, I know people they probably know a little bit about lament, but not fully. This conversation definitely helped. But I was wondering if you can teach us kind of the elements of lament, and if there's a person who might want to start practicing writing laments, or a community or a church or a congregation, some of those elements on how to write those laments. Rebecca writes and sings beautiful laments. I'm just saying, maybe we can hear some of that before we go. I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out in the Spirit and see how the Spirit moves us. Hint, hint, Spirit. Let the Spirit lead you. But yeah, I'm going to turn that over to you, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I was going to say, do you want to say anything about Facebook before we move on to that? Did you want to say anything?
I think social media is it is in itself a wilderness. And I do think it has been easier for people to kind of silo themselves because of it. And especially now during the pandemic, it has very much become an echo chamber, and I am guilty of it too. But I do think that posting something on social media is not going to substitute the work that we need to do spiritually and emotionally. And I do think that it does create a quick release of some sort of satisfaction that I don't think is sustainable. And I don't think it is worth that being the sole investment of your emotional outlet. And so I do think that we're going to have to start talking more about the obsession with social media, because it does create a very like instant gratification and not something that is long lasting or, you know, sustainable for our souls and for our mental health. So yeah, social media is an interesting thing that we should just have a topic on later in the season, maybe.
Well, both of you just said something too that I think is also missing from our culture right now. And not just our culture, but even as Christians as well, is confession and repentance. And again, something that we're not fans of, you know, we don't really like to talk about that or think about that. But I think that that's the other really difference, is that, you know, realizing when you've done, again, this is what I really love about the Presbyterian service. That's the first thing you do after the call to worship is, you know, call to confession. And, you know, you say that confession prayer and you say, I really screwed up this week, Lord, and you are acknowledging it and you are sitting in it and you are accepting it and you are saying yes. And we are not good at that in our culture. We don't want to admit when we've done something wrong. I think that social media actually is really bad in that area. I think it's not healthy in that area because people don't want to think about something they've said or done wrong. And not only that, then to take the step further and say, not only did I do something wrong, but now I need to change, right? Now I need to even take a step further, because it's not just enough to say, yeah, that was bad, but it's to take the step towards change. So maybe that's kind of the other thing that Lament can do, is taking that step towards change and bringing us towards that. Anyway, so I'll just really quick just go through what the normal steps are, realizing that they don't really happen in any particular order, realizing that they may or may not be present in a lament, but that these are the common elements that are present. So usually it's almost in a prayer form, which is why I love this form, because again, it's a way of kind of guiding you towards prayer when people feel like, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to do this. So some sort of attribute that you are calling God by a specific name that is special to you, that you feel is meaningful to you. Then actually voicing the complaint that you have honestly and openly, inviting God into this process, pointing it out, knowing that God sees it already. That's the other thing, knowing that God sees it already, but that we are confirming that we now see it, right? Not just God, but we see it too. An honest call to action saying, you know, this really is what needs to happen. This has got to change. This has got to happen. Then trusting in the past, again, saying, God, I know in the past you've come through, right? You've seen it time and time again. We know that this can happen and we know that it's there. We're just not there yet. And we really need you to step in and do this. Then what will happen? And this is a step that I remember, was her name Grace Destiny, that she really liked. That's part of Lament, is what will happen. And I think the other thing that's so wonderful about this step is it's kind of like what you talk about in counseling. You know, using I statements with people. Have you heard this, right? So you say, you know, I wish you would, because then if you did, this might happen. So it's kind of inviting the person to change their behavior instead of saying, you're annoying me, change and fix this, but explaining to them how then things could be different if they did. That's what I think this step is about, right? Because what could change, God, what could happen is then, you know, your reign will be here. Justice will be here. Everyone can feel safe when they go and get in their car, no matter how old they are and what their skin color is. That is hope, right? That's what we are hoping for. And then finally, some sort of praise. Again, even in the lament, there is praise. There has to be praise. There has to be hope. And yet there are a few laments in Psalms that do not have praise in them and that are incredibly painful, but are nevertheless important to read and worthy of reading. So those are the basic steps. And anyone can try it.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I wonder about those psalms that don't have that praise. And for and for people out there who may not have hope right now, that to know that there are places in Scripture where that's okay. Like there are people in history that in our text that they didn't have hope at the time. And I feel like a lot of people right now may not. That it's so far down the road and it's so far down any kind of path of resolution or whatever that they just don't have it. And I feel like a lot of times you feel guilty about that, and that that maybe some people may think that God can't handle that, but I do think it's for me it's very comforting knowing that in Scripture we can look to it and say, well, today I don't have hope, and that's great. Maybe tomorrow I will. Maybe next week. But I do think that is very, in many ways, it's very comforting just to kind of like sit in that too, and to know that. But I do wonder if you have a prayer of lament that you would like to share with us in this moment.
I can. I'll tell you, did y'all see the PBS program the other night where they were talking about the Washington, when Marian Anderson sang at the Lincoln Memorial? Again, as I'm a classical singer, Marian Anderson is, just, I mean, and again, I was watching her do that with tears streaming down my face, and I was just going, and yet here we still are. That happened. We think of that. I know it didn't happen that long ago, but it seems long ago. It's not even in color. It's in black and white. So maybe it happened forever ago, right? But I see that and I hear that woman sing, and I just think, why? But I think we also have to remember that our time and our concept of time is not God's concept of time. I think that's really hard to remember, right? It's not our concept of time, but so you know what, I do have the Lament Labyrinth. I didn't know. I mean, I don't know if that's something you would like.
Anything that the Spirit is leading you to share or not share.
Mm-hmm. I'll read that because I think that it's got some things that we talked about in it that I think would be nice to share. I'll just introduce it by saying that I'm actually doing an independent study and actually studying labyrinths and what prayer labyrinths are and what they can do for you as far as contemplative prayer goes. And I am a bad, quiet prayer sitter. My mind wanders so bad. And so I have found that labyrinths actually are so helpful for me because I'm so hyper. And it's a way of grounding me. When I feel that ground underneath my feet, I am there in that moment. Whereas sometimes when I'm sitting by myself, I get really distracted. So I don't know if y'all feel that way too. But I also think that laments offer that structure too, like a labyrinth does. It offers you a structure and offers you a thing to hang your ideas on. So I'll go ahead and just read this, and you can just close your eyes and listen, or whatever people want to do. God of our pathways, guider of our steps, we are walking our individual life labyrinth, ceaselessly, frantically searching for you. Yet you do not seem to be there. Where are you? Why are you hiding yourself from us when we need you? Our paths twist suddenly and we're thrown off balance as we take the turns too quickly, as we focus on our own way, as we ignore the agonies and anguish of others who are suffering from the indignities of inequality, injustice, and infirmity. We meander, looking eagerly toward our life labyrinth center, longing to draw near to your presence. And though it looks like we'll see you at the next turn, at the next turn, at the next turn, you're still not there. And we are left to continue wandering aimlessly far away. Or so we think. And then we're there. We're at the center of our life labyrinth, and we realize you were always there. And it was not you who left us. We never left your sight, for you surrounded us, ever personified in the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the sick, and the imprisoned. And it is then that we realize that our call to you was actually your call to us. Send us back out on our wandering paths into the world, knowing that every turn, every stumble is a lesson to be learned. We glorify your name, for your power alone will strengthen our trembling legs and our unsure feet, and guide our weak arms to not only embrace those who suffer, but to fight for them against the powers of evil that never sleep. For this is your work that we do. This is your path that we walk. This is the life that Christ lives in us. Amen.
Amen.
I feel like we just need to sit with that for a second. Really reflect and think about it. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. And I'm glad that we could end on an example of what a lament can be. And yeah, end on, I think it's one of those like spiritual feelings that you don't really, I mean, it takes time to process, but yeah, that feeling that things are acknowledged, and but there's also some hope. So thank you for that in this moment that we need it so badly.
Yes.
So we're so grateful that you were with us, and we hope you return.
Maybe when you wrap up that project, you can come back and tell us what you learned about labyrinths.
Well, and I just appreciate it so much, you guys. It's again, I think it's conversations just like this, and that people can participate in vicariously. And like I said, I don't know any other way. We have to talk.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we started this, is hopefully in some way, whoever is watching this, that they may begin these conversations wherever they are. And we hope they happen in congregations, but even around your dinner table, even in the midst of, like right now, I can't go anywhere. I'm snowed in, and some people may be with their family. Like, maybe this is a good time to kind of be like, hey, what do y'all think about what happened? Yeah, you can't go anywhere. What do you think happened? How are you, like, what are you feeling right now? And just asking people that, even like, what are you feeling? How are you feeling?
Yes.
Because we're going to have to start doing that. And I totally agree. We're going to have to start talking. And so thank you for reminding us of that. So yes, did you have any last words of wisdom? And then at the end, Destiny and I are going to make a couple of announcements, but we'll let you go if you after you have a little last minute comment.
No, I would just thank you so much for allowing this space, for us to talk about issues that are hard, that are not fun, that people might think are not uplifting, and yet they are always a step in another process, right? You can't just skip over this step and then move on to that next step.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to sit in this. So thank you for allowing the time and the attention to it. And I would love to come back anytime. It's been lovely.
Awesome. Well, we'll invite you back.
Yes, for sure.
For whatever season after this. Whatever that season may be. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
All right. Peace out.
Bye, Rebecca.
Bye.
Well, that was great. A good reminder for all of us.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna practice maybe writing some laments during Lent. Maybe try to do one a day. We'll see. There's a lot to lament about. So
yeah, it's really nice to have a structure.
Yeah, I was going. I'm like, I need to write that. I need that again, but I'm just going to email Rebecca, and we have it on the Yav. But maybe I'll post it onto like just bullet pointed for people who need it at home as well.
Yeah, we might. We can get something and put it in the comments. Later. What's going on next, Destiny? What's going on next that people need to know about?
So, with us or with the PCUSA?
Well, we'll start with us. So I'll start with next week. People need to tune in because we're gonna have another amazing guests.
Yes.
To talk about Womanist Theology and what that means for us now and in the church. We're going to have the Reverend Chantel Hinton Hill and the Reverend Rosalind Bower to be here to talk about womanist and womanism. And so, yeah, check it out next week. And then also keep a lookout for March's schedule, which will come out soon.
Are we pretty much booked for March? Do we have our lineup secure? I'm excited.
We are pretty much booked. So yeah, just a preview. We're going to be talking the first week of March about women in the Bible. March is Women's History Month.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about women in the Bible. We're also going to be talking about COVID a little more, talking about the pandemic and specifically when it comes to vaccine and how we should be thinking about equity and surrounding that. And also a little bit about the science of the vaccines, which we're going to be asking some people that are working in the church in the Presbyterian denomination and also in an interfaith type way of that. And then we're going to have a Trans Day of Visibility episode to give visibility to our trans siblings, which is very much needed at this time. But that's just a rundown of what's coming up.
Stay tuned. Got a great lineup.
And then whatever you want to say about what's happening in your work.
Thank you, Lee. So, as we mentioned throughout this episode, Rebecca was one of the teachers for the weeks during the virtual YAB program. And we do plan to be in person for this upcoming year, for the 21-22 year. So if you are a young adult between the ages of 19 to 30 and you liked what you heard, that is just a snippet of what you could be learning on the ground at your sites. So as Lee is showcasing, visit youngadultvolunteers.org. You can apply straight to our website. If you know any young adults ages 19 to 30, and we all do, please share that link with them if they would like to do social justice work, really digging in with poverty, race, and the intersectionality of church. And that's my announcement.
Yeah, check it out because I will say I was a YAV, and and it really changed my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that program. So check it out. It's an amazing program, and it produces people like me. And other people who do a lot of more exciting things than I do. But yeah, it's a great program. And I also wanted, just for the work of Unbound, Disabling Lent, an anti-ableist Lenten devotional, is out now. You can go to our website, justiceunbound.org, and find it. But we will also be publishing different devotionals throughout the Lenten season. And tomorrow we will highlight our Ash Wednesday submission, which is Ash Wednesday is when Lent starts. So y'all need to go out and eat whatever you want. Pancakes, usually the Tuesday before Lent, you just indulge today. And then tomorrow, whatever way you celebrate Ash Wednesday, safely at a distance. We hope you check out Disabling Lent, because it is centering our disabled siblings, the disabled community, and disability theology throughout the Lenten season. And so we will highlight that tomorrow. So check that out. And with that, I am out of announcements. We hope y'all have a we hope y'all have a great evening, and catch us next week for our Womanist episode. So until then, bye, friends.
Peace out.